Hey, welcome into the CJ Silas Show. Thanks for sticking around after tonight's Dodgers-Marlins game. Big show tonight. Chris Broussard from FSR, NBA Insider, will join us to talk about Game 1 of the NBA Finals, with the Suns coming away as the winners last night, and a little bit more about coaching changes in the NBA. It is July. It is our first Wednesday in July on the CJ Silas Show. We will continue to celebrate Black History Month and Juneteenth all year long, recognizing pioneers, activists, and athletes who are making changes and trying to be the best they can be in the world when it comes to shifting our culture and getting rid of systemic racism and making it a fair and free place for everybody to live. I did want to mention that I'm pretty happy about athletes being allowed to get paid for their likeness. You've heard a lot about it all over ESPN radio. It's good stuff and good news for those that can make it happen. The Olympics just 3 weeks away from this week, and there are some good things to talk about in the Olympics. 17-year-old sprint canoe. It's a short version. It's 50 meters. And Nevin Harrison won the World Championships in 2019, also 2019 and 2020 World Cup. 17 years old, had an extra year to prepare. A very good story to watch in the Olympics coming up. Gabby Thomas, who's the second fastest woman in history in the 200 meter, ran a 21:61. That's going to be fun to watch her. Jamaican sprinter Shelly Ann Fraser-Price, 34 years old. She'll run the 100 and the 200. She got the silver in the games in 2012. She is the second fastest woman in history in the 100. She ran a 10.63. Trayvon Bromell, his career almost ended with an Achilles injury. You'll see him in the 100 meter. And we did talk about Arian Knighton last year, the 17-year-old sprinter who's broken some of Usain Bolt's youth records. 400 meter hurdles, Karsten Warholm from Norway broke the world record last week, running a 46.7. Let's see, who made that? It was Kevin Young in Barcelona. He broke his record in 1992, the USA kid. The extreme heat is expected, though, to affect the track and field events. They're moving the marathon and some of the race walks to Sapporo and taking it out of Tokyo. The International Swimming Federation, embarrassing all of us on the planet, FINA, banned a swim cap called the Soul Cap that is a better fit for natural afro hair. Now, let's remember, this is so crazy. Let's remember, blacks weren't even allowed to swim in the same pools as whites as recently as the 1950s. And now black hair is being a target for discrimination, especially with the women in the pool. I'm really hoping that this changes. There are a lot of people fighting it, and you can read all about it all over Twitter. Shame on you, FINA, the International Swimming Federation. And the Team USA basketball team had its first practice last night under Greg Popovich at UNLV. You should check out the roster. There are a lot of really awesome, cool, big names on that list. We'll follow that story along as well. The San Luis Obispo Blues are 16-5 this season. Tonight, they're home. Oh my gosh, speaking of baseball, Major League Baseball, this is such a cool story, whether you're an Angels fan or not. Shohei Ohtani, the first in a very long time on the All-Star team as not only a pitcher, but a hitter as well. I love this story. He was named as the DH. He'll also pitch. He leads Major League Baseball in home runs. He has 31. Vlad Guerrero Jr. has 28. He'll be in the Home Run Derby. He'll pitch in the game, and he'll hit in the game. It's going to be fun. That's next week in Denver with American League manager Kevin Cash and Dave Roberts, the world champion Dodger manager, running it for the National League. Before I get to Black History Month and Juneteenth celebration all year long, I do for a second just want to talk about how disgusting eating contests are. And you're going to get less than a minute about this from me. It's unhealthy. It causes gastroparesis. There's eating disorders. It's a complete waste of food. There's animal cruelty involved. Some of these eating contests eat live animals, the tails off the end of live mice. You can choke. It's so awful. And the waste of food, it offends me, especially especially after what we've gone through with the pandemic. Over 40 million people in the U.S. are hungry, and one guy's eating 69 hot dogs, 80 whatever it is. It's so disgusting. And just a couple years ago, a guy died from a taco eating contest in Fresno. It's just offensive to call it a sport. It's disgusting. It's insensitive. These people should not be stars. That's it. You'll never really hear from me again about it. Well, you will, but it'll just be because I'm complaining about how awful it is and how it's not a sport. To celebrate Black History and Juneteenth all year long on the CJ Silas Show, we are going to recognize civil rights pioneers, athletes that are activists in the world of sports using their voice and their platform. Let's start with Jack Johnson. He was nicknamed the Galveston Giant. He was born in March of 1878 at the height of the Jim Crow era. He became the first Black American world heavyweight boxing champ from 1908 to 1915. In 1912, Johnson opened a successful and luxurious black and tan desegregated restaurant and nightclub. Part was run by his wife, who was a white woman. Jack Johnson was arrested on charges of violating the Mann Act, forbidding one to transport a woman across state lines for immoral purposes, a racially motivated charge that embroiled him in controversy for his relationships, including marriages, to white women. He was sentenced to a year in prison. He fled the country and fought boxing matches abroad for 7 years until 1920, when he served his sentence at the federal penitentiary. Are you kidding me? He fought the fight of the century against James Jeffries in 1910. The former undefeated heavyweight champion James Jeffries came out of retirement to challenge Johnson, saying, "I'm going into this fight for the sole purpose of proving that a white man is better than a Negro." The fight of the century earned Johnson $65,000, over $1.8 million if you compare it to what money is like in 2020, 2021, and it did silence his critics. Jack Johnson is best known for becoming the first Black champion of the world, breaking numerous societal color barriers during the height of the Jim Crow era and the KKK. He passed away June 10th, 1946 in a car accident. He was just 68. In 2018, Johnson was pardoned by former President Donald Trump. Ida B. Wells, born July 16th, 1862, an American investigative journalist, educator, and early leader in the civil rights movement. She was one of the founders of the NAACP, born into slavery. In the 1890s, Wells documented lynching in the United States in articles and through her pamphlet called The Southern Horrors Lynch Law in all its phases. She investigated frequent claims of whites lynching Black criminals only. She exposed lynching as a barbaric practice of whites in the South used to intimidate and oppress Black Americans, who created economic and political competition and a subsequent threat of loss of power for whites. She was active in women's rights and the women's suffrage movement, establishing several notable women's organizations. A skilled speaker, Wells traveled nationally and internationally on lecture tours. In 2020, she was honored with a Pulitzer Prize. Jesse Owens specialized in sprints and the long jump, recognized in his lifetime as perhaps the greatest and most famous athlete in track and field history. He achieved international fame at the 1936 Summer Olympics in Berlin, Germany, winning 4 gold medals: the 100-meter, the long jump, the 200 meters, and the 4x100 relay. He was the most successful athlete at the Games, and as a Black man, he was credited with single-handedly crushing Hitler's myth of Aryan supremacy, while not being invited to visit the President of the United States for his Olympic accomplishments. The Jesse Owens Award is USA Track and Field's highest accolade for the year's best track and field athlete. He attended Ohio State University. He passed away March 31st, 1980, at the age of 66. I like to celebrate Black History Month. We started it in February. We actually started this whole thing last year to honor and recognize Black Americans, Blacks all over the world, really, that are trying to and have been trying to for years, hundreds of years, to shift the focus and shift the culture of this country. We will continue doing it. We have so many to recognize. There's no way. We probably will never stop it. And I appreciate you listening and giving me the platform and letting me use it to do this. I do want to mention Chris Broussard is coming on the CJ Silas Show in just a little bit to talk about the NBA Finals and other stories in the NBA. I want to thank my partners, dermatologist Dr. Brad Kurgis, dentist Dr. Daniel Lapidus, and Larry Ackerman, the Avila Bay Athletic Club and Spa, Michael Moore Sports Recovery, Joy, a juice and smoothie shop in Shell Beach, and California Fresh Markets on 5 Cities Drive in Pismo Beach, where I shop. You can find California Fresh Markets also on Foothill Boulevard in San Luis Obispo and El Rancho in San Ynez. Coming up, it's all NBA with Chris Broussard from SFR and Sirius XM Satellite Radio. Thanks for sticking around after the Dodger game and listening to the CJ Silas Show on ESPN Radio 1280 AM and FM 101.7, The Ticket. Welcome back to the CJ Silas Show. Thank you so much for sticking around after the Dodgers-Marlins game tonight on ESPN Radio. Back at our usual time next week at 5 o'clock. I don't even need to suck up to this guy because lucky for me, he doesn't mind coming on my show once in a while. He's one of the hosts of The Odd Couple on FSR and Sirius XM on 4 to 7 o'clock Pacific time with Rob Parker. And he is, I would say, the star of the show. Well, at least when he's on the CJ Silas Show, he's the star. Chris Broussard joining us to talk NBA. Welcome in, friend. How's it going today?
I'm great, CJ. How are you?
I'm doing well. I'm kind of pumped up. The Olympics are coming. We've got news about USA basketball. There's so much going on with the Major League Baseball All-Star. It just, right now, is really fun, and I'm glad I got to have you on the show tonight. Game 1 of the NBA Finals last night. Suns come away with a win. What surprised me the most was how many minutes that Giannis played, 35 minutes for the Bucks. Were you expecting him to play that much?
Well, shoot, I was hardly expecting him to play. So I thought it might be some gamesmanship when they started talking about he's getting close to playing and he's a game-time decision and all that, because every indication was that we might get him in Game 3. So I was glad to see him out there, and I thought he looked fine. I wouldn't say he was 100%, but I thought he was certainly 90% plus. He didn't look like he had any limitations physically. The only thing, you didn't see him use his patented Euro step move as much. I don't know if that was related to the injury or not. And then I thought he was more tentative offensively for the most part than he usually is. And I think some of that was because he'd watched them play the 2 games against Atlanta without him, and they played well. He saw the ball moving. He saw everybody getting their touches, everybody getting involved. And I think he took a step back for the most part to let other guys get going, and they never did. Chris Middleton got going. Brook Lopez was okay, but Drew Holiday never really stepped up. So I think you'll see a far more aggressive Giannis in Game 2.
He is Chris Broussard from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, an Oberlin College grad, joining the CJ Silas Show. Game 2 tomorrow night, 6 o'clock Pacific. When it comes to the coaching on these two teams, I respect both guys, but there's something in my heart that is rooting so hard for Monty Williams and the Phoenix Suns. What do you think about what he's become after what he's gone through?
Look, I've always thought that Monty Williams was a really good coach. When he was in New Orleans, I thought that, he had a couple, decent run. But I thought what foiled them more than anything, and this goes for their front office too, because obviously their front office took a pretty good beating, but their injuries. Injuries is what killed them more than any. Drew Holiday couldn't stay healthy. Eric Gordon couldn't stay healthy. Anthony Davis had injury problems. I always felt like if they could be healthy, Monty would have had a good team there, and they might have had a nice little run. But obviously he lost that job, and so it is good to see him in Phoenix really kind of getting his just due because, like I said, I've always thought he was a good coach. He certainly learned some things. He's admitted that himself. But him reunited with Chris Paul, who obviously he had early in his career, that's great to see. And right now it looks like they're both could be on the cusp of their first NBA championship.
While we're on the topic of coaches, there are some new hires in the NBA. Washington, Orlando, and New Orleans still waiting on who will be leading those teams. Portland picked up Chauncey Billups, Dallas, Jason Kidd, and in Boston, Ime Udoka. Those are some interesting choices, right? Everybody's talking about Chauncey Billups. Was he ready? Jason Kidd with his past. What do you think about the Trailblazers picking up Billups?
I liked it because, one, I think you had to get a guy that Damian Lillard's going to respect, and buy into. And you know, around the NBA, Chauncey has universal respect. So I think that part is good. What Chauncey has to do, and this remains to be seen if he'll do it, but you have to go in there and find the perfect system for that team. Otherwise, if you just play the typical high pick and roll like everybody else, now he can improve their defense, and I think he'll do that because obviously defense was a calling card for his team in Detroit when they won a championship. So I definitely think he'll improve the defense. He'll focus on it, which is half of the battle when you're in the NBA as a coach. But offensively, while they had a high-rated system, you know, it'll be interesting to see how much he can get out of that group on the offensive end. Will they remain as Dame CJ-centric, assuming there's no trades or anything like that? So that's what I'm interested in. But I think what Chauncey brings, number one, is the respect, which is a big part of it. And two is the defensive approach. So if he can do that and their offense can even just remain as it was, that'll be a huge improvement for them because their problem was they couldn't guard anybody.
He started at the Cleveland Plain Dealer back when I started, so I'm not going to tell you the year because that'll age both of us. Then he was at the New York Times, ESPN, and now everybody wants him. He's with FSR. Chris Broussard joining the CJ Silas Show. Becky Hammon, she's been with the Spurs for a long time. A lot of people have respect for her. How close is she to getting an NBA job?
She's very close, just because she's been in the interview process now. You know, obviously she's on teams' radar. Now, I don't know that she's going to get one of these 3 jobs or get a job next year. But my point is that the first step in the battle after you've done your, you know, your work and you've paid your dues is to begin getting the interviews and getting your name out there. And she's there. So now, will she be the first female? Maybe. Teresa Witherspoon on the New Orleans staff. She's another name that's out there as a female. They're being interviewed. They're under consideration. That's the first step. And so they both are, especially Becky, are at that level.
He's Chris Broussard joining the CJ Silas Show. I was looking at the U.S. team roster for the Olympics, and the Olympics interest me, and I don't know if you and Rob talk about this on your show in the afternoons, but it looks like there may not be any fans, which I think is probably a good idea because I want the Olympics to happen for the sake of all the athletes that waited a year and have been working so hard, and some of the older athletes for sure that need to get it done sooner. They may not get to be back there. And I'm looking at the basketball roster, and we're hearing so much about the season was too long in the NBA, even though it was 10 games short, and it started so quickly after the bubble season. And you've got a lot of NBA players on this team. It's a really good roster that Greg Popovich has put together along with Steve Kerr and Lloyd Pierce and Jay Wright. What do you think about time between NBA into the Olympics and then back into the NBA preseason this year?
Well, I think it shows that a lot of the talk about not having enough rest is a little bit of hogwash. I mean, again, I get that you need rest in the summer, in the off season, and they had a shortened rest, you know, coming into this season. And that certainly can contribute to things like pulled groins and hamstrings and stuff like that. But it's been overstated because, as you said, they played fewer games. The Kyrie Irving injury, that could happen. You know, Kyrie's already been injury prone, but an ankle can happen whenever, you know. And so the ankles, the knees with Giannis, those types of injuries aren't related to rest or lack of rest. They're just injuries that can always happen in a contact sport. When you talk about we need more rest, and then you have players signing up for the Olympics as soon as they're done with their season, or even in some cases, Devin Booker, they're not even done yet, then it makes you question, well, what do you mean rest? And so I think, like I said, it's a little bit overstated, and the Olympics proves that. I personally am of the view, I do think the players need more rest, but I think generally they don't rest in the off-season like they need to. I actually wouldn't mind if we began sending, like we've stopped sending our veterans to the Olympics. Like maybe if we put an age limit, like 23 and under, which would be college-age players for the most part, or 25 and under. So your younger players, they don't have as much wear and tear. We still should be able to send a team that can win the championship or the gold medal. So I think that's something they might want to look into. But the bottom line is I don't want to hear about we need more rest, we're playing too many games, and then you're sending guys to the Olympics in the offseason.
So crazy. Before I let you go, I kind of went off earlier in the show about how much I hate the eating contests and how disgusting it is and how it's not a sport and it's unhealthy. And it just makes me sick. And I thought that I'd at least ask you before I let you go. Have you and Rob talked about that at all? Do you consider it a sport?
We have not talked about it. I don't consider it a sport, but for sure I don't consider it a sport. I'm not as disgusted by it as you are. I think it's interesting. I've met Joey Chestnut when I was back at ESPN, and it's interesting, and you've seen this too. These guys that do this, and gals, they're not overweight. In a lot of cases, they're thin. It's amazing what they do. I do think there's a skill to it, but I certainly wouldn't characterize it as a sport.
I think the hardest part for me is that we've got 40 million people in the United States that are hungry, and we're giving one guy 70 hot dogs. Seriously, that's 70 people that would have a meal. I know maybe I'm just too I don't know, naive or whatever, but that's kind of where I come from too.
I think we could, if we take that logic, which is sound, then we could go ahead and eliminate a lot of things. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And help people out. So you're right about that.
That's true. Thank you for recognizing that. He's Chris Broussard. You can find him on FSR and Sirius XM 83 in the afternoons, 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific. The Odd Couple, one of the best shows on the radio, the most entertaining. You two have such a good time. You're intelligent. You're witty. You have opinions. And you're not afraid to be wrong. You love to be right. I just love the show, and we appreciate having you on the CJ Silas Show and always showing up for us, Chris.
Thank you, CJ. I appreciate it. Keep up the great work. You're a great listen, and good luck in the future.
Thanks. Take care. Chris Broussard coming up next. The Cal Poly Sports Update on ESPN Radio 1280 AM and FM 101.7. The Ticket. Welcome back to the CJ Silas Show. Thanks once again for checking in with us after the Dodgers game tonight. We have a couple more times this season where we'll come on after a Dodgers game. If you don't get my show normally, we're here every Wednesday at 5 o'clock Pacific. And if you don't find my show live on a Wednesday, you can always find my podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the TuneIn app. I think it's up on Pandora or about to be. And the easiest way to get to it is the CJSilasShow.com. This segment is brought to you by dentist Dr. Daniel Lapidus and Larry Ackerman. It's the Cal Poly, Hancock, and Cuesta Sports Update. Not much going on over the summer, but Hancock College has some news. Chris Stevens was named the Regional Coach of the Year by the American Baseball Coaches Association. He had an 8.13 winning percentage, a number 5 ranking for the Bulldogs, 18-6 overall, 13-3 in conference play. There was no postseason due to COVID, but congratulations to Chris Stevens. Dakota Sanders and Ryan Cartano from the Hancock men's basketball team both committed to colleges. Sanders going to the University of St. Mary's in Kansas, and Cartano going to Holy Cross. And in baseball, another kid commits to a 4-year college. Second baseman Jeff Ray will go to Chico State. He had a .313 batting average for the Bulldogs. The COVID numbers for this first Wednesday in July on the CJ Silas Show. The NFL has had 0 reports of opt-outs as the NFL's deadline for players to opt out of the 2021 season passes. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver reports the league financially weathered the storm of COVID. In the NHL, Tampa Bay Lightning family members denied entry to Canada as the team closes within 1 from the Stanley Cup Finals. The NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman announced the league altered their decision to support a women's professional league due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Major League Baseball, Blue Jays reinstate Steven Matz from their COVID-related injury list. LA Dodgers visited the White House last week, becoming the first championship team to visit the White House since Biden took office. And in the Olympics, Serbian Olympic athlete tests positive for COVID-19 in Japan. A surge in COVID-19 cases in Tokyo a month out from the Olympics. That is not great news, but I'm still hopeful for the Olympics. Thanks for listening to the CJ Silas Show. We will be back in our usual time, Wednesday night, 5 o'clock Pacific on ESPN Radio 1280 AM and FM 101.7. Thanks for listening. Have a great night. And I'm going to turn off my mic now. You've been listening to the CJ Silas Show on ESPN Radio 1280 AM and FM 101.7. The Ticket.